Hello. Welcome back to Jen's Books. How are you doing? I hope you're having a fantastic week so far. This is one of my six from the shelves recommendations videos where I pick six books from my, let's face it, too many books from my bookshelves and piles of books that have something in common, and we talk about those and provide some recommendations. As always, it'd be lovely to hear if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts are. So in this video, the thing that the six choices have in common is that they're all westerns. So this is a genre I will admit I've not read a huge amount of, but I have really enjoyed all of these books for different reasons, some more than others. But it's something that's always been kind of close to my heart because my granddad really loved westerns, and I have memories of him, leafing through piles of them, sat at his table. So it's a genre that I've always wanted to read, but haven't really known where to start. And it's not a genre that feels like is incredibly popular in contemporary writing at the moment. But the first book I wanted to start with is one that I already actually discussed in my June Reads video. So it's not going to be any surprise to anybody who's watched that video that it's the 1968 Charles Portis book, True Grit. You may be familiar with this. This was, it's been made into film a couple of times, most recently about 12 years ago. But the lovely thing about the book is you can understand what the characters are saying. And this is the story of Mattie Ross, who is a 14-year-old girl who is seeking justice for her father, who was murdered by the coward Tom Chaney, who shoots down her father in Fort Smith. Her father took Tom Chaney in to help him and support him, gave him a home, gave him work, and Tom Chaney killed him. So in lieu of anybody else to find justice, Mattie goes on this journey, and she takes on a US Marshal called Rooster Cogburn, who is a real character. He's sort of drunk quite a lot of the time, but he's hard as nails. He's seen it all. He has a bit of a reputation for sort of pushing the boundaries of the rules. In fact, when she first meets him, she sees him giving evidence in a court case, and it's really quite funny. The whole book is full of humour, but also full of heart. As well, and Mattie is just this fantastic spitfire character. The story is told through her voice. It's a first person point of view, and it's probably one of the most compelling and engaging voices that I've read in an awful long time. It's not a massively long book as well. So Mattie and Rooster go off across into the sort of uncharted lands to try and track down Tom Chaney and his gang. And they also, along the side, take on a second character who assists them, whose name, well, you'll have to read it. You'll have to read it and just find out. It's just fabulous. It's really funny. It's got real heart. At the end, it sort of gets you in the feels. But just that first person point of view is fantastic. I don't want to give too much away. I will include the link to my review in my June Reads. But if this is one you haven't read, it's certainly worth reading. And I wanted to read something that was a little bit older, a bit more of a classic Western, in contrast to the more modern reads that I'm talking about in this video. So the second book I want to talk about was The Sister Brothers by Patrick deWitt. And this is one that I think it was made into a film at some point, or is in the process of being made into a film. Patrick deWitt's a Canadian writer, and this was published in 2011. If you're looking for something that's very hyper realistic and captures the West in the 1850s, this probably isn't the book for you. But if you don't mind something that feels quite modern and quite funny, a bit vulgar in places, but striking and quirky, this might be a book that you enjoy. It's basically about two brothers, Eli and Charlie Sisters, the Sisters brothers, who are assassins, and they've been taken on to travel from Oregon to California to kill Herman Kermit, who's a prospector. Their boss is the mysterious Commodore, and he sent them on this journey. But basically, one thing goes wrong after another. It becomes sort of a comedy of errors and misadventures as they travel across the country trying to find their man. Charlie's quite plain spoken and binge drinking and remorseless, and then Eli's this sort of more sentimental character who's kind of at odds with his brother. I've read some sort of contrasting reviews about this book, and as I say, it's one that I think you'll either really enjoy, or it won't be for you. But if you think that that sort of quite modern comedy interpretation of these sort of cowboys travelling across, it's worth looking at and finding out whether you think that's going to be a book that appeals to you. The next book I wanted to talk about is How Much of These Hills is Gold by Pam Zhang. And this book was published in 2020. I really love this book, even from the opening. It had me. And apparently I read somewhere that the opening of the book came to her in a dream. But I just just found it so beautiful and poetic, and every single word in here counts. And I think if you like poetry, you're probably going to enjoy this novel. But it's also an adventure as well. It tells the story of two young children, Lucy and Sam, who are children of Chinese labourers, and it's about their journey through California during the gold rush in a quest to find a burial site for their father. So they initially go to ask another character to whether they can bury their father, but it all goes badly wrong. Someone gets shot and they end up on the run, basically, taking their father's body with them, and the father's body becomes sort of almost a character in itself. But it's a really interesting deconstruction of the myths of the Wild West. They show the environmental damage that's wrought on the countryside as they go through their observations. It isn't all how you imagine John Wayne with the planes. It shows the devastation that man had on on those locations during the gold rush. And it's also really interesting exploration about family and about love. One of the characters is actually trans, and so it's a really interesting exploration into gender identity as well, in sort of a historical context. So there's lots to take in here, lots of sort of areas for discussion and thought. I think this is another one that would be really good for a book club. But I just really found it a beautiful a book, and really lovely to enjoy. This is it's talking third person point of view, so there's a certain amount of distance, and so we get to see a bit about both characters, but also there's quite a lot of showing over telling here as well. But again, this is one that I heard sort of mixed reviews of, but I really thought it was a beautifully written book. I really enjoyed it, and as I say, the descriptions and the lyrical quality of the language in this book particularly enjoyable. So another one that I recommend. The next book I wanted to recommend was The Hunger by Alma, and that came out in 2018. So this is a slightly different read, and I'll include a photo here because I have it somewhere but I couldn't locate it. And this is a sort of horror story that's based on true life events. So it's the story of the Donner Party, who travelled across the country to California in 1846, but they never made it. It's sort of a whole wagon train of people travelling this immense journey, and they sort of kind of make a mistake along the line. They make a decision that means that they end up stranded and snowed in over winter. And it's a story of survival, it's a story of horror, and it's a story of what people will do to survive in these extreme circumstances. And as I say, there's an extra, although it's fictionalized, there's an extra layer of horror here, because of the fact that that this is based on facts, that of an event that actually happened. And there's also sort of this theme of cannibalism, and it basically no one really survives this winter, but it's a really interesting read. What Katsu does is she then includes a kind of supernatural element, which actually I don't think you needed necessarily. I think it feels a bit like putting a hat on a hat, but she brings in sort of witchcraft and other kind of themes into the story and into the characterization of some of the individuals that are on this wagon train. I'm thinking of wicker and wagon, and it came out the wrong way. Anyway, but it's a really interesting story, and I've read a few of her books. I've also read The Further, which I quite enjoyed, which is about a contagion, and The Deep, which I wasn't a big fan of. That was a story, sort of a retelling of the Titanic sinking, which I didn't love, I have to be honest. But of the books I've read of hers, this is the one that I enjoyed the most. I think it's quite atmospheric, and there's a real sense of mystery. We have some interesting characters to get to grips to, and the dynamics between these families that have gone on this journey. So if you like something a bit more horror, a bit more supernatural, something that draws on actual real events, but is also fictionalized and has some interesting character studies, but again is based in the same sort of time period, in America, and covers this journey, from the east to west coast, or east to west coast, then you'll probably enjoy this story. It's got some really good atmosphere, not fully scary, but enough to certainly make you feel uneasy, and there are some quite visceral details in there as well. It'd be interesting to know, if anybody's read that book, what your thoughts are, whether you enjoyed it or whether you didn't. As I say, we're going to disagree at times, and by no means was that my favourite ever book, but I did enjoy it, and I did enjoy those historical elements as they came through into the novel. The final two books that I wanted to recommend, I really, really loved, but it's difficult to talk about these because they're actually related. It's one after the other, one and its sequel, and they're both by the fabulous Sebastian Barry. The first one is Days Without End, which was published in 2016. And I loved this book, and I couldn't wait when I found out that there was going to be a sequel. So I'll do my best to tell you a little about these books without giving away too many spoilers. If you don't like spoilers at all, it's probably best to whiz through this, but definitely recommend both Days Without End and A Thousand Moons, which is its sequel. So Days Without End tells a story of Thomas McNulty, who's our narrator, and he escaped the Great Famine in Ireland by coming over to America. And once he's in America, he's homeless, he knows no one, and he ends up making a living by cross-dressing at a salon to entertain the guests. And there he sort of meets another person about the same age, just sort of both teenagers, called John Cole, and they become lifelong friends. And actually, I don't think it gives too much away that they become more than that. And this is a story about two soldiers, really. These two young boys, they become too old to pass as women, and they go off and they join the US Army, and they are involved both in the Indian Wars and then in the Civil War. And these are both tough men, and you have some quite visceral and horrifying accounts of events that took place, in particularly in terms of the Indian Wars, that are quite difficult to read. But this is sort of juxtaposed with this journey of these two really strong, beautiful men who are wanting to, more than anything, build their own family, and how they do that, how they're drawn together, and the connection between the two of them. Along the journeys, they end up picking up an orphaned Sioux girl called Winona, and she becomes the final part of their family. So the story goes through all these quite horrific ordeals and these experiences as soldiers. And I don't want to give any more about that away, but it's just really beautifully written. It's not a massive read. It won't take you too long to read, and I just think it's a really beautiful book. The language is really fabulous, it's great atmosphere, and you get to really care about Thomas and John and their family. So really, really love this book. Definitely recommend if it's something that sounds like it's up your street. The sequel takes us back to the same characters, which is fantastic. But in the sequel, we're looking through the eyes of Winona. This is her story. In fact, the first line in the book is, "I am Winona." And the book is told from her point of view. Again, it's a first person point of view, so it's quite up close and personal. There's a level of trust with Winona. And alas, she has to travel through her own challenges and struggles through this novel. So at the opening of the novel, Winona is engaged to a white man called Jonsky, and the locals object to this sort of mixed racial relationship, and she sort of wonders herself whether this is what she wants. She lives with both John and Tom, but also another character as well, called Elsie, and it's all about, it's difficult to not to give too much away, but she gets assaulted, and there's kind of it's all about sort of search for the perpetrator of the events, and also kind of living in peace after trauma, how trauma affects us. So there's explorations of race, there's explorations of trauma, there's explorations of sexual assault. So it's not going to be a book that's for everybody, but if you buy and enjoy Days Without End, or get it out from the library, of course, you will really want to read this one. I can guarantee it, because they follow on. But they're both fantastic books. Sebastian Barry is just a wonderful writer, and I've enjoyed a lot of his books. But those particular ones, they really capture the sort of the West, the sort of Western genre beautifully, but really give a new slant to the genre in the subject matter that they're exploring. But those are my 6 books, a bit of a whiz through there. I hope there's something in those suggestions that you enjoy, or maybe you've already read. If you've already read, do let me know your thoughts in the comments. It's always great to hear what people thought of books that you enjoyed. If there are books that you think I would enjoy off the back of those, again, let me know. But if you're new to the channel, basically this channel was set up really to follow my challenge that I set myself to read 100 books in 2023. I do need to tot up. I've not done a tot up in a while, but I'm definitely on track to do so. So alongside sort of reading records, there are reviews, there are recommendations, and you know, you do come along for the ride, and you know, like and subscribe, share if you want to, comment. You know, we're a bit of a community here we're getting, so it'd be lovely to know your thoughts. So thank you again for your time. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.